My name is Kiera Harris, and I work with Claire Aiken on gender differences. So let's get started. So just to kind of give you some background information on the article, it just really broke it down into the history of gender roles and expectations and how they have continuously defined how men and women should are expected to be and how they're able to accomplish things. Men are expected to excel and create and take risks, whereas women were not given much support in education or resources. The article later explores the question about males and females and how they differ creatively and why this may or may not be the case. How gender impacts creative potential and creative performance, and why a gap between the two should even exist. Then it goes into our criterion problem in creativity. What defines creativity? Many modern theorists distinguish creativity between the big C and little c. So big C is more like um, big ideas, such as socially allotted creative acts, such as creating the Mona Lisa or inventing the light bulb, whereas the little c is more like smaller acts. So creative acts to address everyday challenges, such as quickly preparing a nutritious meal. So it's between either are you able to accomplish big things or little things. And then the common mistake of how creativity must be spectacular. Many theorists thought that creativity had to be this big idea. And then there was also the assumption that only men are capable of doing such acts of spectacular creativity. Let me go to the next slide. So the next slide kind of talks about the differences on how do they actually exist. So there was big controversy, and there's passion behind that controversy and how creativity might just exist only between specific genders. So history proves that overrepresentation in in males in every creative field such as science and art. History shows that males are more dominant in those creative fields than women are. Also, biological factors. Women were denied support and resources, so therefore, since women were denied that support and resources, men became that dominant force in those creative fields. And then you have your psychometric perspective, administering tests of divergent thinking. So they decided to administer the test to maybe find or not find the significant differences between the creative abilities of males and females, that they could better explain the historical divergence. So we're going to move to the next slide. And then, so the creative performance. So history shows that men are overrepresented in nearly all creative endeavors and fields in almost all cultures and geographic regions. There's a big inequality gap where in creative production involvement where men are dominant in there, whereas women are not, and it definitely shows through and through historical figures throughout time. Women went through great lengths just to obscure those identities as females. For example, George Sand. George Sand was actually a woman who just created this masculine identity in order to have her work published, in order for it to be this renowned literary work. But in the present, we've done a lot to correct these double standards to advocate for gender equality. Although males still have greater numbers in scientific publishing, engineering, mechanics, musical composition, and painting, women have definitely stepped up in the literature, musical performance, dance, and dramatic arts areas. As far as regional economics and social class structures, it is said that definitely plays a role within our present of trying to understand the equality or inequalities between male and female creativity. And so then it goes into some data that was published to find creative potential. So there are three ideas that need to be noted about the data before we get into it. One, majority of these studies have utilized only assessments of divergent thinking capability as their indicator of creative potential. So there was only one indicator of creative potential within this entire data set. The second one was almost all of these studies have utilized samples of school-age children with very few actual searching for differences among a sample of adults, men and women. So all of these studies were samples of school-age children and not adults. And then the last one is divergent thinking assessments provide valuable information, but this information is only one piece of the creativity puzzle. So there are there are a variety of other aspects, but this was only one piece of the creativity puzzle. So within the data, it was found that approximately 100 published studies regarding gender differences in creative potential, only one half found there to be no observable effects. So within 100 studies, roughly only half of them, there was no observable effects. Studies found small degree of advantages by female test takers, actually outnumbering those finding an advantage for the males by 2 to 1. And then the conclusion just basically says that a reliably measurable gender difference is creative potential does not appear to exist. So there does not appear to exist that there are creative differences between men, or in this case, boys or girls. Going back to the fact that this case was only on younger children and not men and women. So there are many they're trying to figure out the historical explanations behind it all, as well as raising the question of why is there such a gender gap in creative performance if there is there's no differences in gender creativity. And then, so trying to explain the differences, if there's no significant difference between males and females that can be found in terms of creative potential, how can the historical and modern creative performance gap between men and women best be explained? Well, there goes the nature versus nurture aspect. They were trying to figure out, okay, so men and women definitely go through different cultural and different experiences, asking whether genetics and natural gender physiology and psychology differences are more responsible for the gap, or like I said before, males and females, maybe they just experience different things. They have different destinies in their lives, and then like I said before, biological and socio-cultural factors play a role as well.
So I am going to dig a little bit deeper into each of those different theories. The first theory is the biological arguments. One biological argument is not supported by any empirical evidence, mainly just stories. It's the family-focused argument. The family-focused argument is that women tend to focus more on family relationships. Another biological argument is the field difference. The field difference argument is that each gender is just better at specific fields. There is also the hormone-based argument. The hormone-based argument says that hormones in utero affect brain development in males and females. There's also the psychological androgyny argument, which is a study that was performed on androgynous individuals that showed that they perform better at many different creative tasks. And just an interesting note, they defined androgyny with a hormone saliva sample. The other side of the argument are the sociocultural arguments. The sociocultural arguments are very related. The first one is rigid social expectations. For hundreds of years and generations, women have been expected to care for the home. Outliers are subject to punishment or harsh ridicule. So, since women were forced to stay at home, they found acceptable creative outlets that were passed on throughout generations, such as gardening and cooking. Another argument is that the system is run by men. People who are evaluating art were men mostly, and they preferred other men's art. So the conclusions of this article are that there are no significant differences between the sexes in terms of potential. However, there are huge differences in terms of performance and history. The question we're still exploring is, why is there this performance gap? Is it societal influence or biological or a mix of the two? The questions we want you to reflect on are what theory or theories do you support and why? 2, how might we, as educators, work to close the gender achievement gap? And 3 is a personal narrative opportunity. Have you ever been subject to criticism for not obeying social norms? This might be the fact that females are expected to be gentle and calm all the time, or if you're a man, the fact that men are expected to be tough and not emotional all of the time. Thank you for listening to our presentation.